you might not agree with everything that I say. And that's awesome, because guess what? We live in a democracy where the free exchange of ideas and opinions is a cornerstone of how our country and society functions. So if we actually have points of disagreement, I would love to hear your position on something and have a real conversation. Something that I've been traveling around the country encouraging everybody to participate in. If you don't agree with your friends or your family members or your peers, then have a conversation, because having conversations is the only way that we grow and change and move the needle with others and affect change in the world. It's really important. I think that we've gotten into this weird idea in our country that is totally wrong, which is that we're in two camps. You're either on one side or you're on the other side, and we just don't talk to each other anymore. We don't like each other anymore, and we certainly don't sit down at the dinner table with one another and talk about politics. It has not been like that until very recently in the history of our country. For the longest time, Democrats and Republicans not only would sit down and have conversations about things, but they would also go to Congress and develop consensus on ideas. For the longest time in this country, elected Republicans and Democrats worked together to solve problems for this country. It wasn't always this stark political divide that we have now. So I'm engaging in this conversation, and I encourage you to do the same. And I would love to just maybe spend a few minutes talking about a couple of things. I think that if you follow me on social media, you know that I am a staunch Harris Walz supporter, and there are a lot of reasons for that. I really believe in reproductive freedom. I really believe in LGBTQIA rights. I'm a really strong supporter of the Ukraine and their right to independence, and the U.S. supporting them, and I believe that the Harris Walz ticket will do that, and the Trump Vance ticket won't. I believe that voting rights are really important. You'll notice that in your state, it is actually difficult to register to vote, and that is because Republicans have made it more difficult to vote, because when more people vote, elections don't go as well for them. So that just happens to be my opinion, and we could have an exchange of ideas about that. And I also believe in what's called progressive taxation. I think it is better to give tax breaks to working people than to give tax breaks to corporations and billionaires. And that's why I'm supporting Harris and Walz. I believe that it's really valuable to provide a child tax credit for working families, because that money goes back into the economy. It ends up being an investment that grows the economy and lifts families and children out of poverty. So that's another reason that I'm supporting the Harris Walz ticket. I think that integrity is important in our leaders, and I happen to think that Kamala Harris is going to be a leader of integrity. And whatever side you are on in the political spectrum, I think we can all agree that's not Trump's strong suit. But I would love to maybe field some questions. Before I do, I'm just going to say a couple more things, because if I don't say it now, I'll likely forget. Arizona is what is characterized in the polls as a toss-up state. That means the polls cannot tell which way this election is going to go. It's so close that just a handful of votes on one side or the other will affect the outcome of the election. You happen to be in a swing state that's a toss-up state, so it's an even cuspier category than say Pennsylvania or Michigan, which a lot of attention are on. And you happen to be in a congressional district that's also an intensely contested congressional district. That means that you're a truly purple congressional district. And right now, the U.S. House is so evenly matched that just a handful of seats flipping in the U.S. House will determine which party is in control of the House of Representatives. So there's Amish Shah, Dr. Misha, I love his name because it has Misha in it, is running in your district. And in the last election cycle, the Democrat lost to the Republican by less than 1%. That's just a handful of votes in a congressional district.
It's okay, I'll clean it up in a little bit.
Making sure that you're registered to vote, making sure that you have a voting plan, and making sure that your friends and families do as well. That right there, this crowd right here, potentially has the power to turn this congressional district, and turning one congressional seat might end up being turning the balance of power in the House of Representatives and really impacting national legislation. So there are a lot of people in the country who don't actually have that much of a voice on the national stage. Like I was born in Boston, Massachusetts. People in Massachusetts can vote for president, but it's not actually going to make that much of a difference because Massachusetts is going to vote blue for the presidency. It's just sort of a foregone conclusion. So those votes aren't nearly as important as your votes because you could be the deciding vote in deciding not only this House race, not only Ruben Gallegos' Senate seat, but also potentially you could be deciding who is the next president of the United States. Don't forget that in 2004, Al Gore lost to George Bush by just a few hundred votes in the state of Florida. Just a few more people turning out to canvass, just a few more people getting their friends and family to vote would have meant we would have had a different presidency for 4 years. We would have had a very different climate agenda, and we would not have been engaged in all of the same wars in the Middle East that we found ourselves in. So a lot could have changed with a handful of people turning out at the polls and getting their friends and families to turn out at the polls. With that, I'm not going to just yell at you. I'm also going to ask some questions of you and listen. Does anybody have anything that they want to talk about? Yes.
I'd like to say, first of all, thank you for bringing awareness to everyone about Ukraine and about this important vote. We need to make sure that even though I'm sure everybody here registered or is registering, that you check every time, like once a week, because people that I know personally have been kicked off the voter registration list. And I think that it's very important to keep checking because we don't know why she was kicked off, but yes, it needs to be said.
So unfortunately, in our current political arena, there's some very dirty tactics that are being resorted to, and one of them is purging voter rolls. What that means is when you go to show up at your polling station, you might find that your name has been deleted from the list of registered voters. And typically it has been, this has been perpetrated by both parties, but it is being perpetrated more by Republicans and the right. They're purging voter rolls in districts where they think it's more likely that there are more Democrats voting in order to improve their chances in the election. So you have to check your registration status. It can happen for all kinds of strange reasons. It can happen because there's a convicted felon that shares your name, or it can happen because there's somebody who died who shares your name, or it can happen because you're just unlucky in a database. But you need to check your registration status and get your friends and family to check their registration status as well,
right,
because there are literally millions of voters in the United States who have been purged from the rolls in this election cycle. It's not a handful of voters, it's millions, and you may be one of them. So check your registration status.
How do we check that? BeBallotReady.vote.
What is it?
BeBallotReady.vote.
BeBallotReady.vote.
Okay.
You can also go to vote.org. You can go to headcount.org. There are a lot of different places you can do it. I actually have, if you go on my social media, you can find a post about head count. I am running I mean, it's basically bribery, I guess, what I'm doing.
100%, but I love it anyways.
If people want to go to a Supernatural convention, I know that most of you don't even know what Supernatural is.
Okay.
And you're really only here because you want to talk about the election. But in case there's anyone that does know about Supernatural, if you go to Headcount, if you go to my Headcount link, which you'll find on my social media, and you just check your registration status, just going on that form and checking your registration status enters you for a chance to win 2 tickets to a Supernatural convention with 2 flights to the convention and hotel and a signed box set and a bunch of other bullshit. So, but that's just bribery.
I would have just been happy with the Supernatural convention, to be honest.
What's that?
There's a QR code in the library. That's how I found out I was kicked off.
You were kicked off?
Yeah.
You weren't on the rolls? Amazing. Well,
I
so
printed
that's
my name and they're like, that was not in the records. So,
okay.
yeah.
Well, that's
It's 120,000 people for Arizona from the last 2 years.
so in the last 2 years, 120,000 people have been purged from the rolls in Arizona alone. So,
Wow.
What is purged?
It's a big word for Elmo.
and this week, 100,000 additional names have been filed to be purged from the rolls by. This is what I just heard, and my source is undeniable. If this fact proves to be wrong, this is who you come.
Are they mostly Democrats?
Yes.
Check you're voting, because if you're voting in person, they did not update mine, and it was like 100 miles away, and I had to drive down there to vote.
Saw it pop up.
So that's very important. So I'd like to just talk about